What if I told you that some of the most profitable trees in America are not the ones most people plant? While many people focus on fast-growing crops or short-term side hustles, some trees quietly produce nuts, syrup, berries, specialty wood, and other valuable products for decades. Trees like black walnut and chestnut may provide long-term income while also increasing the value of the land around them. These are not overnight profit ideas. They are slow-growing assets that can support food security, self-reliance, and steady value over time. In this video, we are looking at 7 forgotten trees that may produce useful products year after year with far less work than most gardens or crops. Some are great for backyards, while others fit larger properties and farms. Let's start with one of the most valuable trees you can plant. First, black walnut. Black walnut, sometimes called the old farmer's goldmine, is one of the most valuable multi-purpose trees you can grow in North America. Most people walk right past a black walnut tree without realizing what they are looking at. They see a rough-looking tree that drops hard green balls all over the yard. But if you know what you have, that one tree may provide food, wood, natural dye, and long-term value for decades. Years ago, black walnut trees were common around old farms, fence lines, barns, and country roads. Families planted them because they offered shade in the summer, strong wood for building, and nuts that could be stored and used through the winter. Older generations often cracked black walnuts by hand and used them in cakes, cookies, breads, and holiday recipes. The flavor is stronger and richer than the walnuts most people buy in stores today. In many rural communities, black walnut wood was considered one of the most prized materials a farmer could have on the property. If a family had a few mature walnut trees, they knew those trees could one day help pay for repairs, land, or even a child's education. Some people used the holes around the nuts to make dark natural dyes for cloth, baskets, and handmade crafts. Research suggests black walnuts contain healthy fats, antioxidants, magnesium, and other minerals that may support heart health and overall wellness. They are also rich in plant compounds that give them their deep flavor and strong aroma. Compared to common English walnuts, black walnuts are often considered more nutrient-dense and more flavorful. Now, black walnuts do come with a few challenges. The outer hull can stain your hands, clothes, driveway, and porch if you are not careful. If you harvest them, it is smart to wear gloves. The tree also produces a natural compound called juglone. Juglone may affect nearby plants, especially tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, and certain flowers. So if you plant black walnut, you need to think carefully about what will grow around it. Harvesting the nuts takes some work too. You have to remove the hull, let the nuts dry, and crack the shells, which are much harder than regular walnuts. But for many people, that effort is part of the appeal. It feels more connected to the old way of doing things when families worked with the land instead of expecting convenience from everything. One reason black walnut was forgotten is because modern yards became smaller and cleaner. People wanted trees that looked pretty, grew fast, and did not drop heavy nuts everywhere. Black walnuts can be messy. They take patience. They do not fit neatly into a manicured suburban lawn. But that is also what makes them so valuable now. Most people are not willing to think 20 or 30 years ahead. They want fast results. A black walnut tree asks you to think differently. It asks you to plant something today that may become more valuable every single year. For a backyard grower, a homesteader, or someone with a little extra land, black walnut may be one of the smartest long-term trees you can plant. It can feed you, shade you, provide useful products, and maybe one day become a valuable source of lumber. A black walnut tree is like a savings account rooted in the ground. Second is chestnut. Chestnut trees, sometimes called the old bread tree of America, were once one of the most important trees in the eastern United States. There was a time when chestnut forests covered millions of acres from Maine down through the Appalachian Mountains. These trees were not just beautiful to look at. They were useful in almost every way. They provided food for people, feed for livestock, durable wood for building, and a dependable harvest year after year. Older generations often called chestnuts the bread tree because families relied on them the same way we rely on wheat, corn, or rice today. The nuts could be roasted, dried, ground into flour, or added to soups and stuffing. Farmers also fed chestnuts to pigs, chickens, and cattle because they were rich, filling, and easy to store. In some areas, entire communities depended on chestnut harvests each fall. The wood from chestnut trees was valuable too. It was naturally resistant to rot, which made it useful for fence posts, barns, furniture, and homes. Even today, reclaimed chestnut wood is highly prized because it is hard to find and has a warm, rustic look people love. Then everything changed. In the early 1900s, a disease called chestnut blight swept across the country. Within a few decades, billions of American chestnut trees were wiped out. Entire forests disappeared. Families who once depended on chestnuts stopped planting them because they believed the tree was gone forever. For a long time, chestnuts became something people only heard about in old stories. Many younger Americans have never even tasted one. But in recent years, that has started to change. Growers have developed newer chestnut varieties that are more resistant to blight. While they may not be exactly the same as the original American chestnut, they can still produce nuts, wood, and long-term value. Studies indicate chestnuts are rich in fiber, potassium, manganese, vitamin C, and complex carbohydrates. Unlike many other nuts, chestnuts are lower in fat and have more of a starchy texture. That makes them useful for flour, baking, soups, stuffing, and even gluten-free recipes. As more people look for alternatives to wheat and processed foods, chestnut flour and chestnut-based products are becoming more popular. There is also growing demand for chestnuts at farmers' markets, specialty food stores, and local food co-ops. Because chestnuts are not as common as almonds, pecans, or peanuts, they often stand out. People are willing to pay more for something unusual, especially when it connects to local farming, old traditions, and self-reliance. If you decide to grow chestnuts, it is important to choose blight-resistant varieties that are suited for your climate. Chinese chestnuts and hybrid chestnuts are often better choices for modern growers because they are more likely to survive and produce healthy crops. Chestnuts also need proper preparation before eating. Most people roast them, boil them, or grind them into flour. Fresh chestnuts have a softer shell than many nuts, but they still need to be peeled and cooked carefully. Once prepared, they have a sweet, rich flavor that feels comforting and old-fashioned in the best possible way. One reason chestnuts were forgotten is simple. The original trees disappeared so completely that people stopped thinking about them. When a tree vanishes from the landscape, it slowly vanishes from memory too. Grocery stores stopped selling chestnuts regularly. Families stopped passing down chestnut recipes. Over time, people forgot how useful these trees once were, but now, chestnuts are making a quiet comeback. They offer food security, livestock feed, specialty crops, and long-term value from a tree that can live for generations. For someone with a little space and a little patience, chestnut may be one of the smartest forgotten trees to bring back. Chestnut trees are like an old family recipe people forgot was valuable. Third is pawpaw, sometimes called America's forgotten tropical fruit, is one of the strangest and most overlooked trees you can grow. Even though it grows in many cooler parts of the United States, the fruit tastes like something you would expect from a tropical island. People often describe pawpaw as tasting like banana, mango, vanilla, and custard all mixed together. For many people, the first time they taste a ripe pawpaw is surprising. It does not taste like a normal apple, peach, or pear. It is soft, creamy, and rich. Some people love it immediately. Others need time to get used to it. But once you understand how unusual and rare the fruit is, you start to see why it has become such a favorite among gardeners, homesteaders, and specialty growers. Long before grocery stores existed, Native American communities gathered pawpaw fruit every fall. The trees grew naturally along riverbanks, woodland edges, and shaded forest areas across much of the eastern United States. Early settlers also relied on pawpaw as a seasonal food source because it was free, filling, and easy to find in the wild. There are old stories about families collecting baskets of pawpaw fruit in late summer and early fall. In some areas, the fruit was mashed, dried, or turned into simple desserts. Even famous American explorers were familiar with pawpaw. During difficult travel seasons, the fruit sometimes helped provide food when supplies ran low. Research suggests pawpaw contains vitamin C, magnesium, potassium, fiber, and antioxidants. The fruit is naturally rich and filling, which is one reason it was valued by earlier generations. It may support general wellness, hydration, and energy because of its natural sugars and nutrient content. Pawpaw is also becoming more popular because people are looking for unusual local foods they cannot find in a regular supermarket. Farmers markets, local food stores, and specialty fruit growers often charge premium prices for fresh pawpaw because it feels rare and different. In a world where most produce is shipped thousands of miles and looks exactly the same, pawpaw stands out. One of the biggest reasons pawpaw was forgotten is also one of the reasons it may become valuable again. The fruit is extremely delicate. Once it ripens, it spoils quickly. It bruises easily, does not travel well, and can become too soft within a few days. That is why you almost never see pawpaw in a normal grocery store. Commercial agriculture usually prefers fruits that can sit on a truck, in a warehouse, and on a store shelf for weeks. Pawpaw cannot do that. It has a very short window where it is perfect. But for local growers, that weakness may actually become an advantage. If you can sell pawpaw close to where it is grown, you may have something people cannot easily buy anywhere else. Growing pawpaw trees is usually not difficult if you have the right conditions. They prefer some shade when young and more sunlight as they mature. They also like moist soil and often do well near streams, low spots, or wooded edges. Some varieties produce larger fruit than others, so choosing a good cultivar can make a big difference. There are a few things to keep in mind. Some people may be sensitive to pawpaw fruit, especially if they eat too much at one time. It is always smart to try a small amount first. The seeds and skin should not be eaten, and ripe fruit should be used quickly or frozen for later. For someone with a backyard, a small homestead, or a little extra land, pawpaw can be one of the most unique trees to grow. It offers something people cannot easily buy in stores, and that alone gives it value. Pawpaw is like hidden treasure growing in plain sight. Fourth one is sugar maple, sometimes called the sweet tree of the north. Is one of the most useful shade trees you can grow if you live in the right climate. Most people see a maple tree and think about bright fall colors, leaves in the yard, and a nice shady spot in summer. But a sugar maple can do much more than that. It can quietly produce sap every spring for decades, giving you one of the most valuable natural sweeteners in America. A mature sugar maple may provide sap year after year, once it reaches the right size. And unlike many crops that need to be replanted every season, a healthy maple tree may keep producing for generations. That means one tree planted today could still be giving value long after we are gone. Long before white sugar became cheap and common, Native American tribes were already collecting sap from maple trees. They discovered that when the weather shifted between freezing nights and warmer days, the sap inside the tree started to flow. They would collect that sap and boil it down into syrup or sugar. Early settlers learned the same skill and quickly realized how important maple syrup could be, especially in colder parts of the country where growing sugar crops was difficult. In some areas, maple syrup became one of the main sweeteners families used throughout the year. It was poured over food, added to recipes, traded with neighbors, and stored for later use. Maple sugar was especially valuable because it could last a long time without spoiling. Families often made enough during the spring season to carry them through the year. In many old communities, maple season was not just a farming task, it was part of life. People gathered together, boiled sap for hours, and turned it into something useful. Studies indicate maple syrup contains small amounts of minerals like manganese, calcium, zinc, and potassium. It also contains plant compounds and antioxidants that refined white sugar does not have. That does not mean maple syrup is a health food, but it may be a more natural option compared to heavily processed sweeteners. Demand for local maple syrup remains strong today. Many people are willing to pay more for syrup that comes from a local farm or small producer because they trust the quality and enjoy supporting traditional methods. Beyond syrup, there is also demand for maple sugar, maple candy, maple cream, and handmade gifts made from maple products. If you have several mature sugar maples on your property, there may be an opportunity to create side income with very little equipment. Even a small backyard operation can produce enough syrup for personal use, gifts, or local sales. There are a few important things to know before tapping a tree. Tapping must be done correctly so the tree stays healthy. A tree should be large enough before it is tapped, and you should only drill a small hole in the proper location. Too many taps or poor placement can stress the tree over time. Sap collection works best in colder climates where late winter and early spring bring freezing nights and warmer days. That temperature swing is what gets the sap moving. If you live in a warmer part of the country, sugar maple may not produce as well. One reason sugar maple is often overlooked is because people think of it only as a landscaping tree. They plant it for shade, beauty, or fall color. But they never stop to think that the same tree may also produce gallons of sap every year. We have become so used to buying sugar in a bag that we forget there was once a time when families looked at trees as part of the pantry. They saw value where we often only see decoration. For people who want a tree that offers beauty, shade, long-term value, and a useful harvest, sugar maple is hard to beat. It asks for patience, but it gives back year after year. A sugar maple is like a quiet machine that turns spring sunlight into income. So far, which tree has surprised you the most? Was it the black walnut, the chestnut, the pawpaw, or the sugar maple? Let me know down in the comments which one you would actually plant on your own land. Would you rather grow a tree for food, valuable wood, maple syrup, or long-term income for the future? These kinds of forgotten trees are becoming more important as more people look for ways to be a little more self-reliant and a little less dependent on the system around them. And if you enjoy learning about useful plants, old world skills, and practical preparedness ideas, make sure you subscribe because we still have 3 more forgotten trees to cover. Fifth is elderberry, sometimes called the old country wellness tree, is one of the most useful plants you can grow if you are interested in natural living and home remedies. Depending on how it is grown, elderberry may look like a large shrub or a small tree. It grows quickly, produces clusters of dark berries, and has become much more popular in recent years as people look for traditional ways to support seasonal wellness. Most people know elderberry because of the syrup sold in stores during cold and flu season. But elderberry can be used in many other ways too. The berries are often turned into jams, teas, jellies, homemade syrups, baked goods, and dried wellness products. Some people even make elderberry vinegar, gummies, or herbal blends with it. Long before elderberry became popular in health stores, it was already being used in homes across Europe and North America. Families planted elderberry bushes near the house because they believed the plant was useful to have nearby. Older generations often gathered the berries at the end of summer and turned them into homemade syrups and preserves for the colder months ahead. In many old folk traditions, elderberry was seen as a protective plant. People believed it belonged near the home because it could provide both food and support during difficult seasons. It was common for grandmothers and older family members to keep dried elderberries in the pantry the same way we might keep soup or tea today. Research suggests elderberries contain antioxidants, anthocyanins, vitamin C, and plant compounds that may support seasonal wellness and immune health. The dark purple color of the berries comes from these powerful compounds. Studies suggest elderberries may support the body during times of stress, especially during colder months when people are spending more time indoors. The growing interest in elderberry has created new demand for homemade products, dried berries, syrups, teas, and natural wellness items. Many people are willing to pay a premium for elderberry products, especially if they are locally grown or made in small batches. Farmers markets, homesteads, herbal shops, and online stores often sell elderberry syrup for surprisingly high prices. One of the reasons elderberry is attractive to growers is because it does not usually take years and years to start producing. Compared to larger fruit trees, elderberry can establish itself fairly quickly. It also tends to grow well in many parts of the United States and does not require the same level of care as some other specialty crops. There are some important safety notes with elderberry. The berries are usually cooked before use because raw elderberries, especially when eaten in large amounts, may upset the stomach. The leaves, stems, and seeds should also not be consumed in large amounts because they contain compounds that are not meant to be eaten raw. A simple way to use elderberries is to simmer cooked berries with water, cinnamon, ginger, and honey to make a homemade syrup. Some people dry the berries for tea or freeze them for later use. If you are pregnant, nursing, or taking medication, it is always smart to check with your healthcare provider before using elderberry products regularly. One reason elderberry was forgotten for so long is because it became associated with old-fashioned country living. For a while, people looked at elderberry syrup as something only grandparents kept around. Modern stores replaced homemade remedies with packaged products, and many families stopped growing their own elderberry bushes. But now elderberry is making a comeback because people are starting to trust older wisdom again. They are realizing that useful plants do not need to be complicated or expensive. Sometimes the best things are the ones our grandparents already knew. For someone with a backyard, a homestead, or even a small corner of land, elderberry can be one of the easiest and most useful plants to grow. It offers beauty, berries, and products that people genuinely want. Elderberry is like the old country wisdom people laughed at until they needed it again. Sixth one is mulberry, sometimes called the backyard berry tree, is one of the easiest fruit trees you can grow if you want a large harvest without a lot of work. A mature mulberry tree can produce an incredible amount of fruit every year, often with very little maintenance once it is established. Many people are shocked when they realize just how much fruit one tree can make. The berries can be eaten fresh right off the tree, dried like raisins, added to oatmeal, baked into pies, or turned into jams and syrups. Some people even freeze mulberries for smoothies or use them in homemade wine. They have a sweet flavor that is often compared to blackberries with a little bit of honey mixed in. Years ago, mulberry trees were common around farms, old houses, and homesteads because they were dependable and useful. Families planted them because they knew the trees would come back every year with very little effort. Children would climb the branches and eat the berries by the handful. Chickens, pigs, and other animals also loved fallen mulberries, which made the tree useful for both people and livestock. Mulberry trees were also connected to silk production. Silkworms feed on mulberry leaves, and at one time people believed mulberries could become an important crop for silk farming in America. While that never became widespread, the connection between mulberries and silk is one reason these trees were planted so heavily in the past. Even today, there are forgotten mulberry trees growing near old barns, abandoned fence lines, and rural roads. Some of these trees have been producing fruit every year for decades without anyone paying much attention to them. They are one of those rare trees that can survive neglect and still keep giving. Studies indicate mulberries contain antioxidants, vitamin C, iron, fiber, and plant compounds linked to healthy aging. The dark purple color of many mulberries comes from anthocyanins, the same natural compounds found in blueberries and blackberries. Research suggests these compounds may support heart health, general wellness, and healthy inflammation levels. Mulberries are also becoming more popular in specialty health foods. Dried mulberries are often sold as a snack because they are naturally sweet and contain fiber. Some people use mulberry powder in smoothies, while others look for mulberry jam, tea, or wellness products. Because mulberries are not as common in stores, they often feel more unique and valuable. One of the biggest advantages of mulberry is how easy it can be to grow. The trees are often hardy, fast-growing, and able to handle different soil types. Once established, they usually need very little care. They can be a good option for someone who wants fruit without the constant work that comes with more delicate trees. There are a few things to keep in mind though. Ripe mulberries stain easily. If they fall on your driveway, porch, or clothes, they can leave dark marks behind. Birds also love mulberries, and a heavily loaded tree can attract all kinds of wildlife. For some people, that is part of the charm. For others, it can feel messy. That messiness is one reason mulberry became less popular over time. People wanted cleaner yards and fruit that looked perfect in grocery stores. Mulberries do not fit well into that system because they spoil quickly after they are picked. They bruise easily and do not travel long distances very well. But just like pawpaw, that short shelf life may actually create opportunity. Since mulberries are hard to ship and rarely found in stores, local growers can offer something special. Fresh mulberries at a farmer's market often stand out because most people do not see them very often. For a backyard grower, a small farm, or a homestead, mulberry may be one of the easiest fruit trees to plant. It asks for very little, but it gives a lot back. Mulberry trees are like old fruit factories hiding in forgotten corners. Last is hazelnut, sometimes called the little orchard tree, is one of the best options for people who want to grow nuts without needing a huge amount of land. Unlike large walnut or pecan trees, hazelnuts can grow as small trees or large shrubs. That makes them a good fit for smaller backyards, homesteads, and modest pieces of land where space is limited. Many people know hazelnuts from coffee creamers, chocolate spreads, baked goods, and snack mixes. But hazelnuts can also be used for oils, flour, nut butter, granola, desserts, and specialty foods. Because they are rich, flavorful, and easy to store, they have become one of the most useful nuts in the food world. Long before hazelnuts were sold in fancy packages, indigenous communities and early settlers gathered them from wild stands growing along woodland edges and open areas. Hazelnuts were valued because they were dependable, filling, and easy to carry. Families could gather them in the fall and store them for months. In some areas, wild hazelnuts were one of the first foods people looked for as the weather started to cool. The nuts were often eaten fresh, roasted over a fire, or ground into simple meals. Since hazelnuts are smaller than walnuts or chestnuts, people could gather a large amount in a short time. Research suggests hazelnuts contain healthy fats, vitamin E, magnesium, protein, and fiber. They are often considered one of the more nutrient-dense nuts because they provide both energy and important minerals. Studies indicate that nuts like hazelnuts may support heart health and general wellness when eaten as part of a balanced diet. Hazelnuts are also becoming more valuable because demand for nut-based foods continues to grow. More people are looking for nut flours, plant-based foods, nut milks, coffee creamers, and natural snack options. Since hazelnuts are used in so many products, they have strong market potential for people who want to sell locally. One of the biggest advantages of hazelnuts is that they can fit into smaller spaces. You do not need a giant orchard or acres of land to grow them. A few hazelnut shrubs along a fence line or in the corner of a yard may eventually produce enough nuts for personal use or small local sales. Hazelnuts can also be useful as part of a privacy hedge or windbreak. Since they grow more like a large shrub than a tall tree, they can create a natural border while still producing food. That means they may serve more than one purpose at the same time. If you decide to grow hazelnuts, it is important to know that they usually produce better when you have more than one plant. Multiple plants improve pollination, which often leads to a larger harvest. Choosing varieties that work well together can make a big difference in how many nuts you get. One reason hazelnuts are often forgotten is because many people assume all nut trees need huge orchards, expensive equipment, and years of waiting. They picture giant pecan groves or walnut farms and assume nuts are only for people with large properties. But hazelnuts challenge that idea. They show that even a small amount of land can become productive. A modest backyard or a simple piece of rural property may be enough to grow something valuable and useful. Hazelnuts may not look dramatic at first. They are not towering trees with massive trunks, but they quietly produce year after year, often without asking for much in return. For someone who wants a practical tree that fits smaller spaces, hazelnut may be one of the smartest choices. Hazelnuts are like small land turning into a long-term pantry and paycheck. These trees are not fast money ideas. They reward patience, planning, and people willing to think years ahead. Even one productive tree can provide food, shade, privacy, side income, and something meaningful to pass on over time. The key is choosing the right tree for your climate, land, and goals. There is no perfect choice for everyone. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe for more forgotten plants, old world skills, and self-reliance ideas. Share it with someone who has land or dreams of building something that lasts. See you in the next one. Prices, yields, and profits can vary a lot depending on your climate, soil, location, tree health, local demand, and how long you are willing to wait. This video is for educational purposes only. Before planting anything, it is always smart to research what grows best in your area and choose trees that fit your land, weather, and long-term goals.